folks, Steven here. So this is going to be another one of our live streams. Tonight we're going to be discussing the music of Pokemon PokePark 2 Wonders Beyond for the Wii.
Mhm.
As usual, I have Anne from Pikapi Podcast right here. Anne, you want to give any updates on your end?
Um, yeah, for those of you who don't know, I'm Anne. I run Pikapi Podcast. It has been going a little bit slowly of late, but I still putting out episodes about the Pokemon anime, going through Ash's journey from start to finish. And then in non-Pokemon news, I published a novel. So, like I said, it has nothing to do with Pokemon, but if any of you care about figure skaters trying to be the very best like no one ever was, Grades of Execution by Anne Werner is now available worldwide. Yay!
Glad to hear that. I don't know that I'll ever get around to writing the great American nonfiction or fiction novel or whatever category it falls into. All right. Yeah, like I said, the main focus of tonight is going to be discussing the music of PokePark 2 Wonders Beyond. But we have a few things to go through. First off, I have a little icebreaker game as usual.
Yes.
Yeah, so Anne I did give her the category for this, but as you may know, over the last 6 or 8 months, we've been doing these sort of AI art-based quizzes and types stuff like that. So this time I have a quiz. So let's see what we got. If I can punch that up.
Will I fail less today? We'll find out.
Okay, I think this is the correct presentation here. All right, so just to give folks a little heads up here. So the way this one works is I took a bunch of screenshots from Pokemon Masters EX. That's the mobile game. That's the squad-based 3-on-3 mobile game where you have a bunch of different characters from around the Pokemon franchise that you have the ability to use. So you get to... I've taken those and I've run them through a somewhat complicated process. Just to break it down a little more simply, there's a model called Realistic Vision, which is used to produce realistic pictures of people. It's tuned on that. And I also used what's called an embedding that I have based on a bunch of stills from the Detective Pikachu movie. So the basic gist of this quiz is what would these characters look like in a Detective Pikachu style movie? Your goal, as well as Anne's goal, is to sort of guess, based on the picture, what character these are. I've tried to arrange them in roughly ascending difficulty, and there is at least one character in this quiz who is specific to, Pokemon Masters EX. But Anne, let's see. We did the album art description thing back in like December. That didn't work out so great, so I hope this proves to be a little bit easier. I'll also try and explain some of the issues I ran into along the way. All right, so here's our first picture. I did put a little watermark over the image and the bottom right, just in case no one uses these to claim that there is some sort of live action. I mean, there is one, but these are not pictures from it. I can tell you that much. All right,
Okay.
and this is our first picture. Who do you think it is?
Okay, my first guess is going to be Misty.
And that's correct. This is
Okay.
Misty. And in fact, let me go on to the next slide.
Cute.
So it's actually a particular
Ah!
variant. Yeah, so a lot of the characters in the game, a fair number of them have what's called a Signa Suit variant, where they have usually a different Pokemon and a different outfit. So this is Signa Suit Misty. So she doesn't have her trademark side ponytail in this one, or just wears her hair down on this.
That would be an amazing cosplay if anyone has time.
Yeah, so certainly you can there. But that one's hopefully a fairly easy one. Just to give some things here, there's another slide at the very end that has an alternate for this that I considered picking out. As far as aspects that I had difficulty with, I mean, obviously the dress isn't a perfect match in any way. There's one that's in the alternate that's a little closer but has some other issues there. You can't see her ears, so you can't model the earrings. and stuff like that. So you still don't get exactly what you want out of this, but it's, I think, a fairly good photo there. But yes,
Hmm.
yeah, so a lot of the characters in that game have alternate costumes for various things in there. Um, Misty also has a separate swimsuit one where she has her Psyduck, so she has at least 3 in there. All right, well, let's go on to the second one here.
Oh. This is harder.
Yeah, so these are in mostly order of increasing difficulty.
It doesn't bode well for the rest of them. I am gonna go with. Oh no, but they're not a redhead.
So just to remind you, let me explain who all the folks are in Pokemon Masters. So most of the playable characters are either gym leaders or equivalents, Elite Four members or equivalents, champions, trainer classes, and then, like I said, there's a few original characters. But that covers just about everyone in the game. One of the ones who's not in this list, because it probably would have been too easy, is Ball Guy, who was recently added a month or two ago during a special event. That one might have been a little too easy.
Okay, I'm going to guess. It doesn't explain the keyboard, but I'm going to guess Lance the Dragon Trainer first.
It is not.
Okay, so it's
I'll give you a hint. This is from the Sun and Moon generation. This is one of the trial captains.
Right. Okay. I don't think I'm going to get this one.
Okay.
Is it Sophocles? Is it? No, because he's not a captain.
No, I don't remember if captain is the right term there, but trial givers is probably actually the correct term. But yes, you did get the name right. This is Sophocles.
Oh, it is Sophocles. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, so actually, I think when I wrote the prompt to transform this image into the one you see here, I think I misidentified the thing he's holding in his left hand there as a calculator. It does appear to be a smartphone, but you can sort of see there. I did go through a number of variations of this one. I tried to get one that made his shirt design look at least somewhat like a Game Boy, which is what it's supposed to look like. It kind of gave up on his little, I don't know what his neck thing is there. That's
scarf.
A scarf of some sort. Yeah, it's kind of weird there, but yes, that's who it is there. So yeah. So these weren't, by the way, designed to look like specific actors. Certainly, I'm not up on who the child actors are these days, but it is Sophocles from Sun and Moon. All right, let's go on to number 3.
Okay. So we're gonna have. Or a couple who this could be, but let's think. Okay. My first guess is gonna. I don't know what she wears in Masters EX. But
this one is pretty close to her main game appearance. I'll give you that.
Okay, then it's not going to be Skyla. Okay, how about, is Dawn in this game?
She is, but this is not Dawn.
It is not Dawn. Okay. Can I get another hint? Or
it's one of the gym leaders from Diamond and Pearl.
From Diamond and Pearl. Ooh, that makes it. Now, if it were Roxy, she'd be less cute. Who else?
And Roxy is in black and white.
And black and white. Whoops. Who else is in Diamond and Pearl? I think I'm gonna pass then.
Okay, you're probably gonna kick yourself when you realize
surely.
This is Candace.
Oh.
Who, to be quite honest, I think is kind of one of the lazier later generation gym leader designs. No offense to Japanese schoolgirls out there, but it doesn't seem like. I figured they could have made her like a figure skater or maybe even curling or skiing or something. But the one thing that was obviously very difficult to get that I would have taken more work would have been her pigtails or whatever you want to call her, or dual ponytails or whatever you want to call them. Just because that's just not really a natural hairstyle. And that will be a theme going forward, that it has trouble doing hairstyles that are not reasonable. But
well, that's Pokemon's trademark. So
otherwise, I think I got it pretty well.
But you're right; it's just a chick wearing clothes, so sometimes it doesn't stick in your memory.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I have to say though that I think this particular model does a pretty good job of, compared to some other ones that are. Well, I'm not sure I want to particularly go there, but we'll kind of move on. But yeah, okay, let's go on to this. Will be the number 4.
Lieutenant Surge?
No.
Okay. Okay, what will be my second guess? Who is that kid in Sun and Moon that is friends with Ash? Kiawe?
It is not.
Okay.
I'll give you a hint. It is from Ruby and Sapphire.
Oh.
So probably earlier than you might have thought.
Yes. Okay. Ruby and Sapphire. Is it one of the Team Aqua leaders?
It is not.
Okay.
Although those are playable characters in Pokemon Masters, it is not one of them. I should point out, yes, evil team leads, even that aren't gym leaders, which is most of them, are present in the game. So that's the other category I forgot to mention.
Okay. So I'm looking for Ruby and Sapphire with a mohawk. And I'm losing it. Sorry. Okay. Wallace? No, because he didn't have he was an older gentleman. And his name wasn't Wallace, it was something else. It was Watson, but he's still too old for this. I don't know.
Okay. So this is Sydney. He's one of the Elite Four of the Hoenn region. He's the Dark type Elite Four member, if I remember correctly. So this one worked out especially well.
Yeah.
Like if this character seems like someone who could really show up in like Detective Pikachu or that universe or that depiction, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, the other interesting thing is I had to put down Crimson for his hair there. So if I ever do Flannery with this, I guess I'll probably have to do the same thing. But because red is an actual hair color, but there's also, because this is semi-anime based, there's
right
also red hair. But the jacket worked out pretty well with the gold and the dark brown or black. Yeah, that worked out very well. All right. Let's move on to number 5.
Oh. Is it Caitlin?
Wow, that is exactly right. This is Caitlin.
Yes!
So the thing it kind of got wrong here, I mean, the head is obviously not the right shape, but it just could not fathom someone having that much hair.
I mean, I feel like someday I may achieve that voluminous, but that mask.
I think the sleepwear. Yeah, she's from. I think she's actually from 2 places. I think she shows up in the Platinum Battle Frontier, and in the Elite Four in Black and White.
Black and White.
I believe.
Yeah,
she's
no,
in
I
both
remember
of those.
her, and yeah, just thinking what a cosplay that would be if I could ever grow my hair that long, because my hair does take over an entire room sometimes.
Well, speaking of Black and White, if I ever do this with Iris, that might be a problem as well. Other than that, yeah, so getting something that looks kind of like that, and the lighting isn't totally different, but you can see it's kind of going in a different place. All right. Well, we got one more. Let's try and go through that. I don't want to keep too long on this since this is supposed to be a pre-show, like I said.
Nonetheless, I'm not doing half bad today.
Yeah, you're doing certainly better than this one. So this is our last one. So this is the character who is specific to the game. So I will give you that hint. He's specific to Pokemon Masters EX.
Right.
which you should definitely
Okay.
play because we will be discussing the music of that in a year or two.
Yes, this is true.
Um,
Um, Given that I'm not 100%, like, I have not played a ton of EX yet, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get this. Uh, but yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know.
well, you might have had a better shot if you'd remembered more from the short I released last week, because this is Lear, Prince Lear,
Oh,
as it is. Um, the guy who has a confined Hoopa as his Pokemon in the game. Um, let's see, the
I knew
'80s
those
called they want
sunglasses
their
were gonna get me.
sunglasses back, but
Or Kamina, like.
um, but as you can see here, this one turned out pretty well with the rays of light. So most of these pictures are either their profile pictures in the game or a shot of them using like they each what's called a sync pair has a super move, and this is part of the animation of Lear using his. Um, so he's one of several original characters in that game. He also has a sort of bodyguard guy and sort of an assistant female character who I also considered using in here. But this one I think turned out pretty well. It's got the tie and that and the overcoat or whatever it is that's dark gray on top of the thing there. Um, so it's kind of I think this one turned out pretty well. So getting more with this, let's take a look at a few bonus slides here before we go back to the regular stuff. So this is an alternate slide of Misty. The problems I had with this one were one that her left arm seems overly long, and the arms just didn't work out too well. And her belly button looks a little off, even though she's turning there. It doesn't look quite right either. So even though this dress is closer to what she has in the game under her Signa suit, because it has those little things on her arms, it didn't quite work out. And then here's one I decided not to pick, or I tried to make work but didn't. So AI art is getting better at hands, but this was still too much for it. This is Lyra in a special costume. This is one that, as we're recording this, you can actually still try and get, and is part of, I think, the mystery series or whatever that's going on right now as we're recording this. So it has Lyra in a Team Rocket outfit, and either like the fingers on the two hands, touching each other and stuff. It had a lot of trouble with that, and then getting the output right and all that stuff. And I think you definitely got Caitlin, Misty, and I thought
I did
Sophocles
get
you got right before I was about to.
It took me a while on that one.
So I think we may do something like this again. I try to vary these things up. Let me go ahead and exit out
Yeah,
there.
no, that was super fun. Even the ones I didn't get, like, it was really quite cool.
Yeah, like I said, I don't claim full credit because, like I said, they are transformed from screenshots from Pokemon Masters EX. But I like to explore the possibility of, especially given a recently released video game movie that is doing very well commercially at the box office, has crossed 800 million and is likely to be over 900 million by the end of this weekend. Of course, that's the new Super Mario Brothers movie, which I suspect will do quite well and may put some stuff in. We'll see if we can work that into our discussion a little bit. But I don't want to take any more time since it's almost 20 after, and I apologize for taking so long there. But let's go ahead and get our recording stuff started up. I have to boot these things up. So yeah, let's get into our actual discussion. And see, I have my notes. I have my other presentation for our feedback later in there. So give it a second to... All right. So I'm going to hit record on both of these. Okay. They're both... Oh, wait, no, the other one isn't penned. There we go. I didn't push it quite hard enough to full-on start it. All right, so they'll be a little bit separated, but that's okay. All right, so leave a little bit of a pause, and then I will start the actual discussion. Remember, if you have any comments on this game, music or otherwise, please try and toss those into the chat. We will try to work those into our discussion. No promises, but we will try. Hi, folks. Steven here. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast. And in our continuing series of Pokemon side game music discussions, we've reached the second Generation 5 side game, and that ends up being PokePark 2 Wonders Beyond for the Wii. We are going to be jumping between systems a little bit, but right now for this one, we're on the original Wii.
Yay!
So, did I write down the right? No, I did not write down the right. 1 second, I got to correct the dates. I must have the year wrong, but I'm pretty sure I know how it is wrong. Oops. There we go. All right. Well, as far as when this game was originally released, in Japan it came out in late 2011, in November. The rest of the world got it in 2012. North America was the end of February. Europe and Australia was in March. And as far as the original experience there, I actually have a little bit of a story. I had sent in my original Wii for service. I think they actually ended up just replacing it with the same model. And so around the time when I started playing this was right after I got that back, because my old Wii had sort of just locked. It's a long story there. But I did play through the whole game there, enjoyed it quite a bit. And did you get a chance to play this when it came out? Did you have a Wii of some variety by then, or were you still Wii-less?
I'm not sure what my state of Wii was when this came out. I do know that I never owned this game. I have only played it vicariously through others, like at cons or at friends' houses and the like.
Did you get a chance to play any more of it for this discussion?
Not for this discussion. I kind of had to rely on my old memories and Let's Plays.
All right. Well, I did get a chance to go back to this. I did a little bit of a live stream, although it's an unlisted thing, so you probably can't find it on the channel anymore, even though it is technically there. But as far as who worked on this, like the first PokePark game, this was a Creatures Inc. produced game. So Creatures Inc. is obviously part of the Pokemon family of companies that are co-owner of the brand. And just like the first one and the Ranger games, they also effectively produced this. As far as the people who worked on it musically, we have 4 names. 3 of them should be very familiar from prior Creatures Inc. Pokemon games. One of them is new. First off, we have Takuto Kitsuda, who I guess goes back a ways. He worked on the discarded N64 version of Mother 3, some E-cards, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and the forthcoming Detective Pikachu game. Kenichi Koyano, who is known for working on some of the Ranger stuff, Inuyasha game, and Bloody Roar, the series. And let's see. And Shigeru Yoshida, who worked on Guardian Signs and the anime series Rio. Andy, you have any updates on any of those folks?
I don't have any updates on any of those 3, no.
All right, well, we do have one new name. Unfortunately, we may not be able to shed a lot of light. Ayumu Ito. Unfortunately, the only other credit I found for this person was the Detective Pikachu game, so I'm guessing they stayed at Creatures for a while. We'll see if/when Creatures produces another dedicated Pokemon game if they show up. And did you have any information on this individual?
Yeah, I have a couple other credits. They've not have any credits on Pokemon games before 2010, which is it looks like they had a little bit to do with Pokemon Ranger Guardian Signs, but they also did some work on Pokemon Dream Radar and the Pokédex 3D Pro with sound and sound design. So, like I said, we don't have a ton of information on what other companies they've worked for, what other games they've worked for. But it does look like they stayed with the company for a while. Like I said, the latest credit I have on them is the Detective Pikachu games in 2016.
Well, there's supposed to be a sequel to that at some point, both in movie and game form. So
Mm.
we'll see if we hear more from that individual. And yeah, Dream Radar and Pokédex 3D Pro, probably not something we'll discuss too much on this stream since there's not a lot of musical content either. But yeah, glad you were able to find some tidbits on that person. As far as the overall style for this game, it's not completely dissimilar to the first PokePark, but I would say in general it is more elaborate. It is still mostly that sort of a lot of orchestral type stuff, also some synth types things as well here and there. And do you think that's a fair characterization? A lot of the stuff from the first game style-wise, but more elaborate?
Yeah, it feels like it just took a little bit of a level up, but it's still very much in the same vein.
Yeah, so that's going to carry over into our song discussions, and as usual, we've each picked out 3 songs. And what were the songs you picked?
I picked the Craig area, and I also picked Attraction Failure and the Darkrai boss theme.
Yeah, Phase 1, and sorry
Phase
to those
1.
of you who did not want to be spoiled, but yes, Darkrai is the main boss of this game, although there are some post-game bosses as well. Let's see. I picked Seasong Beach Cove area, Train Depot area. Second here while I scroll. And Post-Story Wish Park. So again, none of these are really that official. These are our best guesses since whatever thing you look up might have a different name for them. But just know that that last one is something you get in the post game after you've completed the main story. All right, well, we try to go in relative game order, and that means that one of my songs is up first. This is Seasong Beach in the Cove area, and this, when we discussed the first PokePark, we noted that a lot of the area themes were a bit sparse unless you were in like the major Pokemon's, I guess, lair or stuff like that. This is laid out a fair bit differently. This song itself plays for a good portion of the Cove area. Style-wise, I'd mostly just call it orchestral. It has a definite off-to-adventure feel, but also off to an ocean adventure. And though you can go in the water, we'll sort of explain that mechanically, probably in our game discussion. But it is honestly pretty different in a lot of structural ways. But Anne, what do you think about this song itself?
Yeah, it's kind of, as you say, a bit bouncy, very adventure-y, but it also has some interesting things going on with the strings and stuff that kind of gives you the feel of being by the seaside and in the surf, or maybe taking a boat across the waves. So it just kind of evokes that our adventure is on the ocean side, which kind of makes sense because when you play the game, kind of the opening shots are kind of that craggy beach sort of imagery. It also sounds very much like kind of the start of a main series Pokemon game, like a Route 1 sort of vibe, not like necessarily in terms of melody, but in kind of feel. So I guess with your off to adventure sort of comment.
Yeah, this is the first truly explorable area in the game. And actually that exploration, unlike sort of the first game, which might have a few different variations of a relatively sparse tune in each area of the park, what this one actually does is it has about 3 or 4, like there are some definite connecting threads, but they are separate tunes there. Like there's one for when you're around the lighthouse, there's one when you're near the portal to Wish Park, and I think there's at least one other thing there, but they are separate songs. And that's a very different sort of structure of, it's sort of an interactive or placement-based soundtrack than what we saw, or what I should say, what we heard in the first PokePark game.
Mm-hmm.
And any particular thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just kind of like expanded on what we kind of got used to in the first Poke Park.
Well, not just expanded. I mean, I wanted to point out that I think this is fundamentally different than what they tried to do in some of the other places. But
But I
oh,
just meant more like it feels the same, but like a kind of again they've kind of just given it more different areas, more different, but like it feels very much in the same vein of Poke Park, but like they've given it a lot more variety.
yeah, yeah, and that'll come into play when we talk about some of the other areas that we've picked out here. But before we do that, Anne, let's go to one of yours. Now, this is technically a track you could theoretically play through the whole game and never hear. But this is the attraction failure. Um, sorry. But this is the attraction failure song. So as you get further in the game, you get to start playing these attractions. Not as many as in the first Poke Park, but if you don't meet the score criteria for them, you'll hear this tune. And what sort of struck you about this one?
Yeah, I'm gonna cheat a little bit and pair it with attraction completion, just because I found it really interesting that attraction failure, it's very bouncy. It's like the happiest you have failed game music I've ever heard. And then the only real difference between it and attraction completion seems to be that attraction completion is sped up. So it's kind of just, I don't know, it gives off this very mellow vibe of like you're still exploring the park and you didn't get enough of a score, but you still had a bit of an adventure quality to it.
Yeah, it also, I guess, maybe suggests that maybe you don't want to take this too seriously as a defeat and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I would guess I'd have to re-listen to the attraction clear to be sure, but I assume it's probably in a different key as well, and opens up with a different, at least in some way, stinger at the very beginning there. But
Honestly,
um,
it's I could listen to attraction completion again, but like I said, what struck me was like it sounded exactly the same, just faster. um, but I could listen to it again real quick and know for sure.
I'm just curious, do you have any idea? Is this the first time we've actually called out a failure song in one of these? I mean, I'm trying to think what other
Um,
games. Like, I don't know if we've ever done a game over track or stuff like that, and there aren't many lives usually. You know,
right.
I think this is our first time actually calling out a failure track in one of these discussions.
It
Um,
might be. I feel like I'm such a contrarian that I might have before, but I can't remember. So this, yeah, this may be the first time.
And one other thing I did want to mention, we're only talking about half a dozen tracks in this discussion, but there are some other pairs out there and counterparts for various tracks
Hmm.
that occur, like going into or out of Wish Park and a few other places in there. So this pattern you've noticed here, it may be represented differently in those other pairings, but it's something that definitely shows up a couple times because of how the game is structured. And I did kind of want to mention that. All right. Well, Anne, let's go on to your second pick. This is the Crag area theme, and from what I listened to and what I've played recently, I mean, this seems a bit closer to some of the structural stuff for the area themes that we had in the first PokePark game. But why don't you describe it stylistically and let us know why you chose it?
Yeah, so the Craig area, it's got a very interesting combination of drums and traditional Japanese instruments and some other Asian instruments. So it creates a very unique sound. I love especially like the little gong noises, but it's got like some weird Japanese style flutes and like something that could be like a shamisen or a shiu or something. And it just creates a very like eerie, maybe deserty even quality. Like it just kind of fits a very different topography than a forest or kind of a lush field or a seascape. Um, and so I just found it just so very interesting and unique for its area.
Yeah, but kind of going back to PokePark Wii, the original, this one does have a lot of empty space in it in there. You know, that is much more in line with sort of the with the original PokePark that would have these sort of somewhat incomplete is maybe a little unfair, but they'd have these vacant spaces in them that sometimes would get filled in if you went to the right place. But um, it's basically what I'm just saying there is this much more in line with the first one structurally, even though it is considerably more elaborate than a lot of those are.
I think I'd agree with that. Like, it's not afraid to like not fill everything out all the time. Um, to kind of just strip things away for a minute or two.
And I guess, we want to kind of compare it to kind of a similar area. I mean, it's a bit different than either the mining area theme in the first Pokemon game or the volcano or whatever area, the hot
Mm.
area in the second PokePark game. It's not quite like that either. So it does kind of say its own thing, which I kind of like. I assume that was your uh, feeling as well.
Yeah, like I said, it's just kind of it's you. All these instruments come together in such a way that it kind of captures you, and it just feels like a familiar sound in that it evokes a place very well, but also a sound that you've not really heard before as often.
All right. Well, I think with that we can move on to my next. Sorry. And I think with that we can move on to my second pick. This is the train depot, or I guess the train depot area. Kind of the way this and also the crag area and a few other areas work is that there's like, if you look at a sound playlist, there'll be a couple different versions that are similar but have like different accents and stuff. And that's kind of what I mean when I say this is similar to what was in the first PokePark game, as opposed to like the beach area, which had different themes for each one that were distinctly different. These ones are more like there's a little bit of a different version, and that's true for the train depot area. Um, Now, style-wise, this is a very jazzy thing, very slow jazz with piano and strings, and it does seem like there's a fairly relaxed vibe to it, which kind of makes sense because if you go to the train depot, it's perpetually sunset for whatever reason. So it's kind of like the end of the day when the trains have all reached their final destination for the night or whatever, although obviously trains can run night and day if they need to. Um, and what was your sort of reaction to this track?
Yeah, my first reaction was kind of surprise because I kind of went in with the expectation of what my experience with trains are, which is kind of like a hustle and a bustle and an energy, and instead got like the smooth jazz and the quiet. And it kind of reminded me maybe of rural train stations, like those that I sometimes found in Japan, where one doesn't run every 5 minutes, and it's just kind of a quieter place, or maybe like in the European countryside, or even like an old timey train station where things are just a little bit more relaxed and laid back and not as busy all the time. So it was again kind of surprise, but like I started to find like a really interesting joy in that kind of different association.
Yeah, as far as the actual trains in this depot, I mean, they're obviously not Shinkansen bullet
Mhm.
train cars or high-speed rail stuff. They're much more like old style um, train cars.
Mm.
Presumably, they can't really tell if they're cargo or passenger or a mixture of both, which you sometimes see. Um, but I do think, one of the things you do as you move around there is you can hop on top of some of the trains and try to jump from train to train as you're, conversing or interacting, I should say, with the other Pokemon in that part of there. Um, so I think it sort of fits the actual action that occurs in that part of the game, which is a bit more laid back. Although
Mm.
there can be fast moments with it, obviously. Um, and I don't suppose was there anything else you wanted to tack on to this one?
Um, I did kind of get the thought that this would be an interesting piece of music to incorporate into the anime with like Silent or the Train Brothers. I kind of just got a thought that this might be something that could repeat throughout different iterations of Pokemon, be it other games or the anime or whatever. I thought that might be interesting anyway.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to what I've already said is that I kind of part of me wants to have like a complete through composed version, like maybe without some of the pauses in there. Because like I said,
Mm.
this uses that little bit of music and then a pause structure that is more common in or that sort of originates from the first PokePark game. So I would kind of like to have one that was more, I guess you could say, through composed or whatever the terminology is there.
So it can
Uh,
just loop?
I mean, it does loop, obviously, but
Yes, but
but just to have it more of a standalone. But we keep using
Mm.
this term, and of course, it's so ironic for this part of the game, track. Um, but Anne, before we move on, I just want to ask you: is that something you would be interested in?
Absolutely. I think that would be really great.
All right, well, let's move on to Anne's third pick. So we kind of divulged earlier, yes, Darkrai is the main final boss of the story. Um, it is the thing that is sort of running and in charge of Wish Park, the sort of dark reflection or whatever you want to call it. But in any case, at some point towards the end of the game, you have to battle it. It's a two-phase battle, and we picked out, or I should say, Anne picked out the first phase of that battle. Um, I'll let you to go ahead and describe it. It's a fairly conventional style, but I'll let you go ahead and describe it, Anne.
Yeah, so what kind of stuck out to me right off the bat was the melody kind of has a little dun 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 dun, which reminded me of the James Bond theme, which I thought was hilarious. But like in general, like this just has a lot of drama going on in this song. Like it uses the notes to create tension. There's lots of movement in the bass sounds. And other than, like I said, the James Bond call out, it felt like a main series, like boss game track in a lot of ways, which, it just was very well done in kind of creating the tension and the energy you need for your final fight and the dramatics of, a god Pokemon basically coming down to do business with you.
Yeah, it's not completely dissimilar from what we've heard from some of the champion battle themes, so I will
Mm-hmm.
absolutely give you that. Not sure I noticed anything of a Bond motif in it, but it's definitely got some horns and drums being the main instruments and some very tense strings going throughout it, which get even, as you imagine, even darker during phase two of this fight. There is also a bit of a chase mechanic to it, which makes sense, especially for this phase. That at a certain point, Darkrai will start zipping around the room, and you have to reposition yourself to attack it, um, and so on and so forth. So that actually fits a bit with that movement. There's less of it in the second phase, and thus that sounds a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, you said you didn't have a ton of experience with this game. Did you ever get to play this boss battle yourself?
I did not get to play this boss battle. I did watch somebody else, though, fight it.
Yeah, so having played this myself, like I said, I wanted to bring in those mechanics there. Anything else in particular you wanted to note about this track, Ann?
Um, Kind of, yeah, just what we've already said, just the energy and the movement of the bass kind of going dun 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 dun, and then you're kind of obviously you have a lot of tension as a player, but then Darkrai is moving around. You're having to change your viewpoint, so it's just again just very good at kind of capturing the moment, I suppose.
Yeah, and like I said, it is a two-phase boss battle, so uh, this first phase is a little more movement oriented.
Mm-hmm.
We'll probably talk about the second phase a little bit during our game discussion. But in any case, after you do defeat Darkrai, you go through actually a bit of a credits sequence and a few cutscenes. But when you return to Wish Park in the post game, the music for that area changes dramatically. During the main game, each sub area, there are 4 sub areas of Wish Park that each have a sort of a variation on a theme there. But when you get into the post game, you can freely move from one to the other, and it's, well, I'll try and describe it. But basically, it changes to this very, I don't know if happy is quite the right word, but very kind of floaty, orchestral, strings and horns melody that I really enjoyed. And I don't know if you ever, well, you obviously didn't get a chance to fight Darkrai, so I'm guessing you didn't get to play it, but I'm sure you listened to the track. What were your thoughts?
I agree. Like all of the Wish Park tracks are really good. Like I especially love the Flight Zone. But yeah, it's kind of just got not synth bells exactly, but like high delicate notes. It's got very floaty synth sounds. It's got some very warm sounds in some of the other tracks. Um, but yeah, it just feels like fun. It feels happy. It feels safe after this battle you've just fought. So yeah, it's just I like these tracks a lot.
Yeah. Actually, there is a part where there are bells ring, which is important because actually at the end of each of the four sections of Wish Park, there is a bell that you ring to sort of signify that you've cleared that portion of Wish Park. And they also come into a play near the climax of the game. I did want to say though that this change in tone does give you as the player a real sense of accomplishment that you've taken this place that was I don't want to give too much about the ending cutscenes away, but it goes to a spot where it really looks like it's maybe not going to survive. And during the game, it's been this very foreboding place. It feels like you've gone in and made it a better place. Perhaps the place a certain character in the game wanted it to be in the first place, but didn't quite go about it the right way. And I think that's something very special. Especially since it's not like in other games where you go to a place and it's got this nice theme, and then it gets practically destroyed, and then maybe at the end of the game, if it gets restored, you get it. This one you do not hear until after the main story of the game, and I think that's really interesting and kind of special. There are other games that I'm sure do it, but I can't think of too much in the way of Pokemon games that do.
Hmm.
At
Yeah,
least
no,
not in
sorry.
quite the same way. And do you have some thoughts on that?
Well, I just kind of like just find it really special the way like so much of Pokemon the anime and the games as well is kind of like focused on nature and this feeling of like you're not just exploring a new land but there's a restoration quality to it that part of you finishing the game is getting to see something come back to life. Like, I don't know, there's just something very special about that and just kind of lives in a section of the Pokemon world that I don't know is very, very important to me.
And that's kind of a structural thing with a lot of Pokemon games, virtually all of the main series and side games, that there is some sort of post game and there is some sort of acknowledgement of what you did during the game beyond
Mm-hmm.
just the end credits. In that the world is somehow changed or protected or restored or whatever from some sort of event there. And I think that's an important feature. And here it's represented extremely well musically.
I'd agree.
All right. Well, before we give our overall opinion on the music, I did want to go a little bit over some of the sound effects and other stuff. Like the first PokePark, the Pokemon have basically their anime voices throughout there. So that is more or less carried over. So you got the voice cast from the TV show, at least in the English and Japanese version. Not sure exactly what they would do for parts of Europe and stuff like that, but that's also a bit of a differentiator, certainly from the main series games where very few, if any, Pokemon have their anime voices. But I think those are all pretty much fine there, as well as sound effects for various things happening. I don't know if there's anything super standout, and it's anything there you want to mention?
No, it's just like I'm always interested in like why they choose to have the anime voices versus like the main series voices. I think it's fun though, and I do like to hear them, and I think it fits the visuals here. So
Yeah. So that is pretty much par for the course in that area. All right. Well, let's go on then to the. One second. All right. So then, sort of speaking about our opinion on the whole of the music, I mean, we said in our opening part that it is a lot like the first game, but with just more elaborate and more fleshed out, and I think that more or less holds. I think it's definitely an upgrade. There are certainly more distinct songs in the game, particularly in the beach area. I'm not sure if they want to do that with everything else and just didn't have time or what structurally, but all the music, even the one that structurally is more like the areas in the first game, is much more elaborate. Not that the first game had bad music, but this is definitely a step up. And do you think that's fair?
I absolutely think that's fair. It kind of just follows on the same theme, but is definitely moving forward and trying more things and making more, I don't know, variety for the different locales.
Yeah, so definitely an improvement in that area. For the rest of the game, though, you'll have to wait until our post segment. But if you had any thoughts on the music of this game or other aspects of it, you can always drop us a comment. You can drop us an email, pokepress@gmail.com. You can drop a comment on one of these videos, or you can also look for us on Twitter @PokePress. All right, let me swap to the other presentation, the feedback. Speaking of feedback, we do have a little bit to go over here. All right, so this is one I wanted to point out. This is a comment on a video by Not Ordinary in Games. It's on actually one of our first discussions. Discussion Pokemon 2000 ending themes, part 1. So before we started doing these live, I would take the audio recorded online but not live and sort of edit that together and toss that on YouTube in addition to the podcast feed. So that's why this video is like that and not one of our actual live streams, because we weren't doing those back then. But all that pushed to the side. The actual comment is about comparing because everyone was there and Twa at Ma. So to be honest, Pokemon 2000 is one of our more lopsided discussions. Not because Twa at Ma, the Japanese ending theme of the second Pokemon movie, is a bad song, but it doesn't quite reach the heights of The Power of One, the English song, at least in my opinion, and I think in a lot of folks' opinion. Like I said, Twa at Ma, hardly a bad song, and I'm sure folks in Japan who grew up with that version of the movie closely associate it with that. But if you're kind of comparing various aspects, it maybe isn't quite that fair. But this poster, Not Ordinary in Games, did a little bit of digging and noticed that because everyone was there, which we talked about during one of our other episodes, I believe it's underappreciated or something like that. I forget the exact name of the episode, but underrated Pokemon songs. We talked about it. It turns out it has basically the same length, and it sort of to try to do a swap out there, and it more or less works the same, which is very interesting. That really suggests that because everyone was there was either a backup or the idea they came up with first. We've talked about this several times. That, like I said, I think the Power of One still is ahead of because everyone was there, but it would be a much more, I guess you could say, fair fight. I don't know. Anne, what are your thoughts on all of this?
I think that's, well, first of all, I think this is brilliant. Good job, Not Ordinary in Games. That's wonderful, because I have gone on record like Minna ga Itakara, because everyone was there, is a phenomenal song and deserves to be the under the credits song. Much as I love Toi et Moi, it's doing its own thing. Whereas Ash singing about his feelings is, it just hits my heartstrings in a special, special way. I think there's definitely a case that it might have been considered as the under the credits song. Like, there's a lot of character songs and image songs on that soundtrack on the Japanese side, like Orewa Collector and such. But there is something about Minna ga Itakara that really sums up the entire movie and Satoshi's feelings about it. And knowing that it is the exact length, yeah, it may have been at least voiced as a possibility for the Under the Credits song.
Yeah, and it's possible sometimes the reverse happens. We've had our suspicions about some of the stuff on Pokemon 25, the album originally being intended for Secret to the Jungle, and maybe perhaps it was broken back out because that movie was not going to get a theatrical release because of events.
True.
Like Wonderful is one. We did get a comment from DGDO33 that I don't have up here that he says that's his favorite song on the Pokemon 25 film, but Wonderful has some very interesting parallels to the movie, and Sin did in fact write some of the songs that are used there. So that's kind of interesting. I also have my suspicions about Art Show and, Vince Staples' Ketchum. I think maybe that was too on the nose for one of the scenes where Ash Ketchum shows up there, but that's just a theory on my part. But, yeah, so whenever you notice things like that, like I said, sometimes it just bears mentioning. I mean, like I said, it might have just been a backup in case they weren't able to deliver the Amuro Namie wasn't able to deliver the song on time, or something fell through contractually, which I know has also happened. Like, I think the song Wonderland from the Pokemon 2000 soundtrack was supposed to actually be the intro to Pikachu's Rescue Adventure.
Oh.
And itself was supposed to be performed by Dream Street instead of Angela Villa. But something fell through there, and we ended up with, Coming to the Rescue, which all of those are fine songs and acts and stuff. But stuff like that can happen and just, has to get shuffled around like that. So
definitely, like, as someone who's worked on, like, theater shows and independent film and stuff, in the back end with the director-producer side, it never hurts to have backup plans ready to go just in case, and especially if you have a format like a CD or something where you can still make use of them after the fact, but like just knowing that whatever happens, you have what you need for when you need it.
Yeah, and we're recording this a couple weeks after the new Super Mario Brothers movie came out, and it turns out that there were some score elements that weren't actually used in the film that were replaced by licensed songs for some of that, and we're not sure if that was a test audience preference thing, or a contractual thing or what. But like I said, these types of things happen. All right. Well, like I said, if you want to give us feedback on this or anything else, you can always put a comment on a video like this individual did, or you can drop us an email, pokepress@gmail.com, or @pokepress on Twitter. All right. So we're actually kind of skipping things here. We sort of talked about some of the things that are more appy, like Pokédex 3D and Dream Radar. We may talk about those at some point, but I don't plan on including them too much in this particular series as main entries. But we are skipping, we're definitely skipping the Typing Adventure, since that never released in North America. Sorry if that was on your list there. And I think when I was looking through the list, there might have been something in Japan that we're also skipping. But just to let you know, our next discussion is going to be Pokemon Conquest for the DS. So this is, I guess, basically the last. I mean, I think PokePark is the last Pokemon Wii game for the original Wii. This is the last DS game. Pokemon Conquest is a crossover series with the, oh gosh, I can see the guy's face on the cover, and I'm trying to remember the name. Nobunaga's Ambition, that's right. So Pokemon Conquest is basically a Pokemon version of the Nobunaga's Ambition series of games, which is, like it outside of Smash Brothers, it's certainly the biggest crossover in the Pokemon realm. I have we're going to have an interesting time talking about the music in this game, especially in relation to a game that came out in early 2022, Legends Arceus, which could have gone in the same direction as this game, and to a limited extent does, but not as far musically.
Well, they are two very different eras of Japan. So.
They are two different eras of Japan, but I think it'll still be a good
Yeah.
comparison point because I don't think people would have minded. But in any case, Andy, did you get a chance to play this game when it came out?
Oh, did I? Yes, Pokemon Conquest and I are old friends.
Yeah, I actually did not quite finish the main story of the game, but it turns out that's only a fraction of the content. But musically, yeah, I think we're gonna have some good selections to pull out of this one. Not that we didn't with our today's game, PokePark 2, but this is going to be a fun discussion, and I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Hmm.
And thank you very much for being on.
Thank you for having me.
This has been Stephen Reich. All right, folks, thanks. All right, so we're going to record next. We're going to record our game discussion once I clear out of that slideshow. So just give me a sense to finish up my water here. But as those of you who've seen our previous discussions will know, we discussed the other aspects of the game.
Yes.
Here, there's actually it's not as radical departure maybe as the Shadows of Almia was from the first Ranger game, but they definitely made some changes here, which I think are mostly for the better. Mostly greater ambition as well. All right, well, give me a second here, and then I'll go straight into the game discussion. I think we can do that.
Of course. Let me get some water.
Okay, well, now it's time to talk about PokePark 2 Wonders Beyond as a game. And, this doesn't have maybe quite as big an upheaval as, say, the second Pokemon Ranger game, Shadows of Almia, did from its predecessor, but they still shook things up quite a bit here in a number of areas. The first one I wanted to mention is that there's actually 4 playable characters in this game. There's Pikachu, just like in the previous game, but there's also the 3 starters from Unova, Tepig, Oshawott, and Snivy, and each one of them has different stats. Each one of them has some sort of special ability, and I think that made the gameplay a lot more varied and interesting. Before I go too far into that, Anne, I assume that was your reaction as well.
Yeah, to have different playable characters, more characters to interact with, more of a plot, definitely.
Yeah, but going back to the characters, obviously one of my favorite games growing up was the U.S. Super Mario Bros. 2. I'll spare our listeners the full story of how that game became what it was, but that has 4 different characters with somewhat different abilities. This one kind of goes even a bit further than that. Like Oshawott's special ability is it can swim, which makes a lot of sense. Let's see. I mean, Pikachu can shock stuff, obviously. Snivy's special ability is that and yes, she is canonically a she in this game, whereas all the other characters, I believe, are confirmed male. But she has basically a higher or double jump or something like that. But her sort of weakness there is her moves aren't as strong. And then Tepig is obviously he can do a charge move and a stomp move, and obviously he can spit fire and stuff like that. And they use all that stuff. Like it'll tell you in the guide which Pokemon are good against a Pokemon if they have to battle it, which ones are not. And they use all that, which I think really fleshes the game out both from a navigation perspective, but also from a combat perspective and all that stuff. And what did you think about that?
Yeah, I agree, because by having the different characters you can play as, you can make more use of the types advantage and stuff like that. So yeah, it just offers opportunities for strategy, opportunities for your player to make choices and tactical things, and yeah.
Although I will say, since Snivy, she's the best jumper and also the fastest runner, for getting around the overworld, she tends to be the best there, so I ended up using her a lot. You can actually see like what percentage you've been using each of them, and she was like almost half of the time there, whenever I didn't need. And I guess one other thing I want to mention in this area is that there are a bunch of each like major area has a puzzle area of some sort where you have to rapidly swap between characters, and you're under a time limit. Although swapping characters, thankfully, does not the timer stops when you're doing that, but you have to go through an obstacle course and sort of make it to the end there, using all the abilities of all your partners there. So definitely some more varied mechanics there, and I think that's very welcome.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, we mentioned a little bit about the story. I mean, we gave away the final main game boss there being Darkrai, but this game is definitely a bit more ambitious in that area with all the different characters. Piplup from the first game returns as a non-playable character, and you go through obviously befriending your three partners there, the starter partners, and all that stuff. It may not be, it's still obviously a game aimed at younger kids. I do still feel like that added more of a sense of, I'm not sure exactly the word I wanted to use, but it gave the world more of a, I don't know if lived in is the right word there, but you kind of get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I definitely do. And feeling that, I don't know, what you do matters in the world. I don't know, that your character isn't just like, I don't know, a bunch of pixels or something, but like it's like you can be that character and you can make friends and you can affect what's happening in the PokePark. Like it just helps it all feel a little more real and like, again, like it matters.
And I think the word I was really looking for there was cohesive, which I think the story does tie things together. And they do some interesting stuff there. Like at one point, near the end of the game, Darkrai wipes the memories of your three other companions so they don't know who you are. And there's actually, as Darkrai is about to send you back out into the world there to be miserable, I guess, there's actually a special loading screen for that where Pikachu is in front of a black background all by itself, as opposed to the other loading screen which shows your partners there as you collect them through the game. So that is interesting. Like I said, they really put that in there. And there's also cutscenes with Zekrom and Reshiram throughout the game, and you can battle them both in the post game if you want to.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh. Okay. What else do we want? What did you think about the sort of the graphical presentation in this game? I think it might be a little bit nicer than the first one, but I mean, we talked about one of the prettier areas. I would say is the sunset area in the train yard there in the tech area that we talked about a little bit with when I picked out the song there. But visually, what did you think of this game?
Yeah, kind of like how I felt about the first game. Like, I mean, obviously this is a little bit better, but like the graphics are, it's not like they're super realistic or anything, but they look like the Pokemon. They look like our cartoony renderings of the Pokemon. They are super cute. And the world looks, again, very much like a cartoony video game world, but they make really good use of lighting. I'm thinking of the scene where they're kind of talking to Darkrai and he's like, I'm so sorry, I tried to destroy your bonds of friendship. But like the little candles going up the stairway and everything just creates a very interesting lighting situation. Like, so it's like, even though it's not necessarily like the high res Final Fantasy cutscene sort of thing, like, I don't think that makes it less. I think that their art direction and their color palette and everything just works very well for the type of game this is, and it just looks very good. If you're not expecting it to look like Detective Pikachu level realism on the Pokemon.
Yeah, so I guess speaking of movies, the other thing we should talk about here, we talk about this with a lot, especially obviously since Detective Pikachu has come out. Would this, or maybe like an original story that uses the PokePark framework, be a good movie? Now, in that particular case, it'd probably kind of be like a Mystery Dungeon movie because the Pokemon would obviously have to actually talk in that scenario. So, but certainly this plot and pacing and characters in this game are much more amenable to that type of storytelling, I would think. And do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I think you could make a really good kids movie kind of Pokemon focused using a plot like this one. I think the art direction as well. I think I might, for a movie, want slightly different graphics. Maybe a television show could get away with it. But like the general art direction of, like I say, the lighting and the presentation and the visual mood, I think added to the plot, I think there's a lot of potential here that could be explored.
Um, yeah, so definitely some ideas here, but this is the last of the PokePark games, and I think part of that is probably actually this didn't sell maybe terribly, but like a lot of Gen 5, I mean, generally speaking, the second generation on the same hardware, which in the case of Black and White is on the DS again, does not sell as well. We'll see what happens with Scarlet and Violet. That one might buck the trend there with the with the sales. We'll see. We're still waiting for the first calendar quarter or whatever, the January through March of 2023 to come through to see how many more millions it's sold in that time period. It's at least a few million more, I would assume. But I think this is probably an underappreciated game. I mean, the first PokePark game, yeah, until it closed a few weeks ago from when we're recording this, you could buy that on the Wii U eShop. And for this one, you've always had to find a disc out there. But I think this game is probably a little underappreciated. I think that's going to be a theme going forward for some of the other Gen 5 side games. I think the sort of the feeling that Gen 5 was a bad generation outside of the trading card game, which I have some major issues with, is a bit overstated out there. That being said, I think a lot of the Gen 5 side games didn't maybe make as big as an impact as maybe they should have. I don't know. As far as this game goes, Anne, what are your thoughts on that?
Um, it's hard to say because on the one hand, I do think it is a little underappreciated. I think, like, if we were not doing this podcast, I don't know if I would have spent a lot of time with this game. And that I think there's a lot of people who maybe even have somewhat negative ideas of this game, just thinking it's maybe a little boring or not very good, or like, why would I play this when I can play Mystery Dungeon? Or, but I think there is enough about it that is a little bit unique and a little bit special that I could see that it could come back if somebody over in the Pokemon company wanted to put together a team and like try to revitalize this franchise. I think there's enough here to work with. And I think a lot of people who did play it have a lot of very fond memories. And when I look through the comments on various websites about it, a lot of people are like, oh, I remember playing this when I was whatever year old. So I think it definitely has its audience and the people that do love and appreciate it, which means I think that like it has potential to stay around if if it is possible to buy it and play it, or at least reboot it somewhere down the line for a different console.
Yeah, when we did Pokemon Channel a year or two ago, we were talking about, they go in a very different direction for the following Pikachu games. And we're going to take another turn here. Creatures Inc. did make another Pikachu game, and it's kind of an important one because it's Detective Pikachu, and we'll get to that in, I think, a year or two. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that says about this particular game. If it was how much of it was the game itself, how much of it was sort of what I think is a somewhat unfair characterization of that particular generation. But it's something I think we'll be coming back to. Especially you mentioned Mystery Dungeon. When we get to Gates to Infinity, I think we're going to have some thoughts there about that one. So
Probably.
all right. Okay, I think that does enough for our recording there, so I'll stop those. Okay. Well, that worked out pretty well. Yeah, I guess the other thing I wanted to mention, but I didn't feel like we needed to add it to our recording there. When I was replaying the game last weekend, I was having a lot of trouble. I was refighting one of the bosses and having a lot of trouble there. Not Darkrai, it's Cough Egregious, the first mini game boss in Wish Park. You can rebattle them, and I don't remember if they're tougher when you battle them in the post game, because sometimes they do that in games when you rebattle them. But I eventually switched Pokemon. I was using Snivy, which doesn't have the best combat abilities anyway, but you're not supposed to have Snivy at that point in the game anyway, so I thought, well, maybe it's more designed for one of the other characters, so I switched over to Oshawott, who has a Razor Shell, which sort of spins a wheel of some sort of destruction around it briefly, which ended up being much better for that particular battle.
Mm.
Um, So those characters, they do definitely fight differently in the game and have different types of attacks that are useful in different places. Although I did see someone who could take Darkrai and really cheese that boss with Snivy very easily and finish it off in like each phase off in 20-30 seconds. So if you know what you're doing, you can kind of plow through some of those fights, it seems.
That's cool.
But overall, I do feel like this is kind of an underappreciated game. I don't know. I didn't check the prices to see if this goes for a lot more than the first PokePark game because of its rarity. I suspect that as time goes on, it may be one of those that I don't doubt it'll get to Gale of Darkness levels of pricing, or certainly not Pokemon Box level of pricing. But I suspect it will get more expensive as time goes on, disproportionate perhaps because it was not played as much. If the first PokePark game did not, if you really just didn't like that at all, I doubt this will change that. If you thought the first one was okay but not great, you might want to give this one a try.
Yeah.
Or if you enjoyed the first game and just never got around to the second one, I think if you can find a way to get a disc of it, I think that's a good option as well. So
I'd say that's a fair assessment. Yeah.
Erratic Addict says, so excited for Pokemon Conquest. Like I said, it's a game, especially ever since Legends Arceus came out, even though they are set in different... I mean, Conquest technically does not take place in Japan, or even that close a facsimile of it geographically, as opposed to Legends Arceus, which takes place like in the northern part of Honshu or whatever it is. North of Tokyo, in that area, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it looks very Hokkaido-like. It does Hisui. It's harder to pin down the exact geographical location of Conquest, but Conquest definitely they're living their best feudal Japan life as far as everything else design-wise.
Well, Conquest map, if you look at it all pieced together, looks a lot like Arceus, speaking of which.
Yeah.
So that's who you meet at the end of the main story. But then there's also tons of post-game stuff for that. You can keep yourself very busy with that if you want to.
I played every single one.
Wow. Well, this is the reverse of what we usually have. Like I said, I didn't quite finish the main game on my playthrough, but I should probably try and do that for now. But I'm sure we'll have plenty of stuff. Like I said, Legends Arceus has a little bit of that traditional Japanese music, but it also has a lot of stuff that is decidedly not traditional Japanese music in any way, shape, or form, and I find that interesting, because I don't think anyone would have minded or bothered that game had it gone in that direction as that Pokemon Conquest does.
That's true, and we probably will talk about this more when we get to Pokemon Arceus, but because it is Meiji era...
is not a side game, so we will not be talking about it in this series. Except as a counterpoint to Pokemon Conquest.
Then I would.
This is considered a main game, just like Scarlet and Violet and
Gotcha.
Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and all that stuff.
Yeah,
at least as far as Game Freak is concerned. Sorry to keep interrupting.
Yeah. I would point out then on the music then, Meiji era Japan has a lot of very interesting influences, not only on its clothing and its architecture, but also on its music specifically. So while it may not sound as traditionally Japanese as we might have expected. The fact that it does have a lot of Westerny influences on it is very on point for the rest of its concept design.
Yeah, I can see a little bit of reason, but all the same, I think people would have been just fine if Legends Arceus just sounded like, higher fidelity Pokemon Conquest music. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I think people. So
I think all the Western people expected that. I bet you though, Japanese people might have felt differently.
Well, that'll be a fun discussion when we talk about Conquest and compare it to Legends Arceus.
Yeah, of course.
That is a fairly obvious point of comparison, and I look forward to putting that in there. So yeah, but until then, folks, I think that kind of does it for this one. I hope you enjoyed our little speaking of art show, our little AI photography session.
That was fun.
So I'll probably try and do more of those types of quiz things in the future. I try to do something a little bit different each time. We'll see what else comes of it. I may just use a different source, but we'll see what happens there. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.